So now we're driving the 2024 Honda Civic Type R, this being the FL5. And let's start off with its engine, right? So what you have here is a 2-liter turbocharged gasoline engine making 320 horsepower and 420 Newton meters of torque, making this the fastest front-wheel drive car ever made. And this is mated to a 6-speed manual transmission, which means you can have tons of fun with it. So how does it drive? First of all, let's talk about the acceleration. It hates being granny shifted. You really have to rev back the hell out of this. The power delivery, to its honesty, simply awesome, because yes, there's a little bit of a turbo lag. In fact, the turbo lag is a little bit more apparent compared to the previous generation Type R, the FK8. But after that turbo lag just goes away, you have a surge of power, and then you kind of plateau. After you plateau for a while, VTEC kicks in, and then you get another surge of power. So as you rev bang this, you really don't allow the revs to drop, and it just goes super quickly. And this is particularly important when you're going between second and third gear as you upshift. Honda redesigned the turbocharger. In fact, they relocated it. So what you have now is more turbo lag, but so much more power on the top end. And there is yet another advantage to that. The older FK8, it has a tendency of like overheating a lot, but now with Honda relocating the stuff under the hood, they say that it doesn't overheat as much anymore. Honestly, I haven't taken this to the track to really find out how much it overheats or how little it does, but yeah, I guess we just have to believe Honda that now you're gonna overheat less with the FL5. Now this car also sounds incredibly nice, and you might think that's because the engine sounds good, right? Well, good news is, yes, it does sound good, but it's a little bit quiet. But Honda has kind of made up for that by giving you fake exhaust sounds. Does it feel too artificial? Not really. It sounds really good, and it really makes you drive just a little bit faster. So when you do pulse to, one thing to look out for is the torque steer that you have, because no matter how amazing this car is, at the end of the day, it still is a front-wheel drive car, and given that you have 420 Newton meters of torque, you will get a lot of torque steer. You really do have to kind of fight it once in a while just to make sure you're keeping on the right track. But really, after that, it's a pretty easy car to drive. In fact, this is a pretty foolproof car to drive, even if you're not good at driving manuals. And why is that so? Well, to give you some context, I suffered a sprain playing badminton just yesterday, so my right foot hurts. Thank God it's not my left foot for the clutch, right? But this car has auto rev match, and it is just aggressive enough to make you feel like a pro while you drive it, but it's not too obtrusive enough to make you feel like you're feeling like you're driving just a computer on wheels. When I drove the Nissan GT-R a while back, yes, I enjoyed a lot. It was super quick, but it doesn't give me this very engaged feel that the Honda Civic Type R gives you. This car, you just feel like you're one with the car. And that is a little bit of the downside of the FL5, because previous generations of the Honda Type Rs, they felt a little bit more raw. This feels a lot more grown up. Frankly, it feels like an Accord that has been like supercharged, but again, it is still raw enough for you to have fun, but also refined and practical enough for you to drive on a daily drive. Having a 6-speed manual transmission really does add to the fun factor of this vehicle, but there is something to look out for, and that is the snag in second gear. If you go from first to second and you kind of granny shift this, there you will snag second gear from time to time. And at first I thought that it could be an issue with this particular test unit, because I'm pretty sure a lot of motoring media people have already really banged this car up. But I asked my Honda friends around, and they said that it is quite normal. So again, there's just a very easy way to remedy that, and just to rev bang the hell out of this vehicle. Now, also this shifter, it really is one of the most crisp, one of the most notchy shifters I've ever tried out there. It's so short too. So really, every single gear shift, it's kind of hard to miss, except for, again, that snag in second gear and when you're going from 5th to 6th. Aside from that small snag in the second gear, another thing you do have to kind of watch out for would be axle hop. Honestly, you can't really counter it too much. Just power through it, and yes, you will feel it, and it feels kind of horrible at first, but once you get used to it, it's a-okay. It's not really a deal breaker. The way this car corners too is just excellent. You can feel that Honda tuned the chassis to be, quite frankly, one of the best in the world, if not the best in the world, being a front-wheel drive vehicle. And the only limitation that you will have here would be your tires. And the problem with these Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires is you kind of don't really know when they're gonna give. You kind of don't feel their limitations. So if you push this pretty hard enough, you just kind of just understeer and the tire gives away. But no point in time would it be a chassis issue. Steering is also really good in the FL5. The last time I drove a car equipped with an electronic power steering system that felt this sharp, that felt this direct, was when I was driving the GT3 RS 991. But really, you can't really ask for too much more right here, especially given its price tag. It's about as close as you can get to how sharp that GT3 RS is, and quite frankly, it feels pretty similar to those older mechanical hydraulic power steering systems. It just doesn't lack in any way. This will communicate with you in every single bend that you push it through. This test unit right here, it has been used and abused, and my pads aren't exactly the thickest anymore. Yet at any point in time that I want this car to stop, oh yeah, it really stops even if I'm going like 100 plus kilometers per hour and I had to emergency brake. When I mentioned earlier that the FL5 is really a very grown-up Civic or Type R, that really is reflected with the way it rides and the driving modes that it has, because this car comes with like comfort, sport, R plus, and individual driving modes, and this also comes with adaptive suspension. Now if you leave this in comfort mode, it is just a little bit more jumpy and jerky and firm compared to a Honda Civic RS. But can you use it on a daily drive without really upsetting yourself as well as your passengers? I'd say yes, because it still is more than comfortable enough. But if you put this in R plus mode, wherein your throttle response tightens, your shifting also, your rev matching also gets a little bit more aggressive, and your adaptive suspension firms up a lot, well, man, it hurts. It really does hurt. But Honda also gave us the individual mode where you can configure things individually. So you can have R plus when it comes to throttle response, but you want your adaptive suspension in the comfort mode. Oh, that is the chef's kiss. That's the perfect mode to drive your Type R in. Pretty much, even if you are driving this hard, even if you're driving it on mountain roads, you can just keep it in that suspension mode and you're golden. Speaking of driving this car on a daily basis, the clutch, it isn't too firm. Not at all even. It is honestly a pretty soft clutch, especially for a performance car. And the biting point is also pretty high, which means that there's a little bit of getting used to at first, but once you get used to it, it's not too much of a hassle to drive because you don't really have to jam your left foot all the way to the floor. It just is very easy to use. And also, speaking of daily driving, let's talk about its fuel economy. If you drive this in heavy city traffic, you're only looking at around 4.6 kilometers per liter, and this is also with occasional pulls when it clears up, which for me I think is excellent for a performance car such as this one. And on the highway, believe it or not, you can actually get 14.9 kilometers per liter in a performance car. What more can you ask for? And with that said, let's now take a look at the exterior as well as the interior of the Honda Civic Type R FL5. To non-car people, the Honda Civic Type R might just look like a regular Civic, but if you're even mildly interested in vehicles, you'll know that this is pretty different. Why? Just take a look at the front end. Your hood, there's vents over there, your grill's kind of different too, it's all blacked out, even have a Type R badge over there, and even your Honda emblem, it's now all in red, right? You get still LED headlamps, and if you look down below, you have even bigger vents for your intercooler. On the side of the Type R2, it looks really wide because this really has a wide body. These fender flares right here, the fender archers is also pretty wide, and your rims, these are all 19 inches big, blacked out too, and they're wrapped in a set of Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires. Your brakes, those are also pretty big calipers, red colored, red painted Brembos. You got lots of real vents here by the side too, a Type R side skirt, and even this wing mirror cap, that's also painted in black. You'll also notice here from the side just how big that rear wing is, which we will get to right now. Now let's go back to this spoiler which we saw from the side. And I really like the look of it. It really does look good. And it's not too aggressive too. It's not overly in your face, but it's about right for the looks of this vehicle. Compared to before, I would say that this is a little bit easier to spot if it's a fake Type R, because the lighting assembly at the back, it's now very different from the Civic sedan that we get here in the Philippines, right? You even have this like center light bar over here, and you even get a rear wiper. So that's a telltale sign that this is a real Type R. Down below, triple exhaust too. Now, the easiest way to tell if it's a real Type R is you simply open up this boot area, and if it is a liftback, then you know that it is a real Type R. And in here, space is actually pretty good. This car is pretty practical. If you want to hide some stuff over here, there's even this like parcel cover. It is pretty thin, but it gets the job done, right? And you can even fold down those rear seats 60/40. Unfortunately, you do not get a spare tire in here, but you do get a tire repair kit. Now here inside, first we check the door as usual. That sounds pretty okay. Now, the interior of the Honda Type R, it's largely similar to the local spec Honda Civic, right? There are just a few exceptions. For example, your seats. These are all in suede, and they are pretty thick and aggressive bolsters on it too. Now, they're also in red, which really makes them stand out. You have Type R spelled out for you here by your head restraints, but aside from that, just your steering wheel badge and this Type R plate by your dashboard. The rest of this really is pretty similar. 10.2-inch digital instrument cluster, 9-inch touchscreen with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. There's also a reverse camera in there, but honestly, the resolution is pretty bad, which is kind of weird. It really doesn't befit this car. But anyway, also in here is what they call Honda Log R. So it's all sorts of your timers and your gauges. They will all show up here, and they actually look pretty cool. Kind of reminds me of what I used to get when I was driving the Nissan GTR, right? Yeah. Now, you also have that same honeycomb vents thing for your air vents, just like the regular Civic. You have dual zone climate control. You get a wireless charging pad. You get an aluminum shift knob, which feels really nice. And by the way, this shifter too, ooh, that is nice and notchy. It's also very crisp, right? You even have an R Plus mode button over here. You got a couple of drive modes. You have comfort, sport, individual, and then your R Plus electronic parking brake. And yes, this does get auto hold, even though it is a manual vehicle. And going back to the steering wheel too, this is wrapped in some sort of like an Alcantara material. So even if your hands sweat, this is perfect. Tilt and telescoping, and you even have adaptive cruise control and even lane keeping assist. That's amazing. Now, if you're gonna ask me, how the hell are you supposed to drive with adaptive cruise control in a manual? Don't worry, it'll tell you when to shift. It is pretty cool, but it only works above 30 kilometers per hour. Now, for practicality, there's also a couple of bits here. So you do have two cup holders here by the center. You still have the center console down here, and you even have a jug holder on the side. For your other materials, are also pretty good. Nice soft touch materials by the doors, some sort of suede or Alcantara on it too, and you even have a Bose sound system, and it honestly sounds pretty good, although not as good as what you would get with the Honda CR-V EHEV. Now for the rear seats, door thud check first. And it sounds so much better. Now, when you are here at the back, you'll be surprised because you might think that just because this is a performance car, it's not practical, but it's about as practical as a regular Honda Civic. I mean, look at your legroom. Look at my legroom. There's just tons of it, right? Headroom though, yes, that is slightly limited due to this sloping roofline. But other than that, this is about as comfortable as you could ever get in a performance car. But typical of Honda though, the premium materials at the front doors don't continue back here. So while you still do get suede where your elbows would touch and where your arms would touch, the top of the door, that's all just plastic. The seats, yes, they get that nice suede or Alcantara material too. You won't really move around too much, but it's not aggressively bolstered either. While there is no center armrest, there are still these two cup holders at the back. And while you don't get any air vents at the back too, since the car isn't really too big, the front vents are more than enough to keep you comfortable back here. So what about its pricing? Well, the Honda Civic Type R costs 3,870,000 pesos. For context, that is about an entire million pesos more compared to its closest competitor, which is the Subaru WRX. And given that we don't really have the STI anymore, well, that really is its closest competitor. Now, for about the same price, you can also get a Nissan Z. Unfortunately, that car is only a two-seater car, a two-door car too, while we're at it. So, is this car worth paying, let's say, 1 million pesos over that WRX? Well, given its capabilities, its practicality, its handling, its power, everything, I'd say that this car is definitely worth its price and definitely worth paying that extra 1 million pesos.